Hi, I'm Lena, and welcome to Super Data JP, the channel where we turn Japan's real estate and cost of living numbers into answers you can actually use. Every video here is built on verified government data, not opinions, and not guesses. Whether you're planning to invest, relocate, or just curious what life in Japan really costs, you're in the right place. Let's get into today's numbers.
Everyone researching Airbnb in Japan learns the same number, 180 days a year. Almost nobody researching it learns the number that actually applies to their building, and it can be as low as 60. We've covered rental yield, hidden ownership costs, and mortgages on this channel. This time, the regulation that decides whether short-term rental income is even legally available to you in the first place. Since the law took effect in 2018, registered listings have grown from 2,210 to 63,658, a 29x increase in under 8 years. Of those, 22,913 have since shut down, leaving 40,745 active listings today, according to Japan's tourism agency. Demand is real. 1,723,600 guest nights were booked in the most recent 2-month reporting period alone, and 57.8% of guests were foreign nationals. Tokyo dominates supply, logging 322,504 operating nights in that period, more than Hokkaido and Fukuoka combined. The baseline rule everyone quotes comes from the Residential Lodging Business Act, Japan's Minpaku law, in force since 2018. It caps short-term rental at 180 operating days per year, counted from noon on April 1st to noon the following April 1st, days with a guest actually staying, not just listed as available. Here's what most people miss. 180 days is a national ceiling, not a guarantee. Cities and wards can, and routinely do, layer stricter local ordinances on top. Toshima Ward in Tokyo, home to Ikebukuro, is the clearest recent example. In December 2025, Toshima's assembly passed an ordinance cutting the operating limit from 180 days to just 120, taking full effect December 16, 2026, as reported by Nikkei. Those 120 days aren't flexible either. They're locked to 3 fixed windows, mid-March to early April, July and August, and mid-December to mid-January. School holiday season, essentially. The part that should worry existing owners most, this applies to properties already operating, not just new applicants. A licensed, compliant listing can have its economics cut by a third overnight. The trigger was roughly 120 complaints from residents, noise, trash rule violations, and safety concerns, as the ward's Minpaku count grew quickly. Kyoto took a different, even harsher approach, and it's aimed at exactly the neighborhoods most tourists want to stay in. In residential zoned areas of Kyoto City, Minpaku can only operate for about 60 days a year, from mid-January to mid-March, the off-peak winter season, when tourist demand is weakest. There's one major exception. Properties certified as authentic kyomachiya townhouses under Kyoto's own preservation program get the full 180-day national allowance instead. That single distinction can be the difference between a Minpaku business that pencils out and one that structurally can't, before you even factor in occupancy or price. Osaka runs the opposite kind of exception, a loophole outside Minpaku law entirely, called tokku Minpaku. Operating under Japan's National Strategic Special Zone framework instead of the residential lodging law, tokku Minpaku properties face no annual day cap at all, genuinely year-round operation, legally. That loophole is closing to new entrants. Osaka stopped accepting new tokku Minpaku applications as of May 29, 2026. Existing certified properties keep operating under the old rules. The reason tracks the same pattern as Toshima. 556 complaints in 2024 alone, already 314 by mid-2025, plus violations like accepting stays shorter than the required 2 nights. The pattern across all 3 cities is the same. Wherever Minpaku concentrates fast enough to generate visible neighbor complaints, cities respond by tightening the rule that made it profitable in the first place. There's a layer above all of this that trips up even careful investors: condo management associations. Most Japanese apartment buildings prohibit short-term rental entirely in their own bylaws, regardless of what the ward or the national law allows. If you're not living in Japan full-time, The law also requires you to delegate day-to-day operations to one of 4,334 registered management businesses, an extra recurring cost most yield calculations skip. Only 64 companies are registered as licensed booking intermediaries in Japan, a short list that includes the major platforms, but confirms this is a tightly licensed system, not an open marketplace. So what does the day cap actually cost you in yen? Run one illustrative case using a typical Tokyo listing's nightly rate. At the national 180-day maximum, fully booked at roughly 19,288 yen a night, theoretical annual revenue is about 3,471,840 yen, a best-case ceiling, not a forecast. Cut to Toshima's incoming 120-day limit, and that same ceiling drops to about 2,314,560 yen, a third gone, before accounting for the fact that fixed seasonal windows make full booking harder, not easier. Cut to Kyoto's 60-day residential cap, and the ceiling falls to about 1,157,280 yen, during the exact weeks tourist demand is at its lowest. Compare that to simply renting the same class of Tokyo investment unit long-term, about 1,924,614 yen a year in rent, at 5.22% gross yield, with none of the operating complexity. At Kyoto's residential cap, theoretical Minpaku revenue doesn't even beat plain long-term rent, even under a wildly optimistic 100% occupancy assumption. Only near the full national ceiling does the premium show up clearly. One honest caveat, that nightly rate is an illustrative market estimate, not an official government statistic, and 100% occupancy on cap days is not realistic. Treat these as ceilings, not projections. Before assuming Minpaku income into any deal, check three things in this order: the ward or city-specific ordinance, the building's own management association bylaws, and whether the property could instead qualify for a special exemption like tokku or kyomachiya status. Even the national count resets on a fixed clock, noon April 1st to noon the following April 1st. So a property that maxes out its days by January is legally dark for the rest of the cycle, calendar quirk or not. We've covered Osaka's investment case on this channel before: lower entry price, higher yield than Tokyo. Its Taka Minpaku status was part of why some investors chased it specifically, a door that's now closing to new buyers, even as the underlying yield story stays intact. We've used the same Tokyo investment condo baseline in our videos on hidden ownership costs and foreign buyer mortgages, worth watching alongside this one before underwriting any short-term rental play. This fits investors buying specifically in a ward with a favorable, unwritten international law ordinance, or securing genuine tokku or kyomachiya status, and budgeting for licensed management from day one. It's a poor fit for anyone underwriting a deal off the national 180-day headline number alone, or buying into a building without first reading its management association bylaws. The 180-day rule is real, but it's the most generous number you'll ever see quoted, not the number that applies to most addresses. Local ordinances, not national law, are what actually decide whether the economics work. Quick recap of the operating day ceilings that actually matter. National baseline 180 days, Toshima Ward 120 days from December 16, 2026, Kyoto residential zones 60 days, Osaka Taka Minpaku uncapped but closed to new applicants. That's the regulation most Airbnb in Japan research skips, the local rule that decides whether the national number ever applies to you. Subscribe for more data-driven breakdowns of real estate and investing in Japan.
And that's today's breakdown. If you're serious about real estate or moving to Japan, research like this is exactly what separates a smart decision from an expensive mistake. Subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive, and drop a comment if there's a city or word you want us to cover next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.